Good evening, friends. Welcome to episode 9 of the Career Shifts podcast. I'm your host, Gopal, and I'm thrilled to have you all here today. For those who have been here before, you already know this, but for those joining us for the first time, Career Shifts is a podcast where we explore the journeys of people who have successfully navigated significant career shifts. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to continue our tradition of starting the show with a story. The year was 2013. I was what I was in what I would call as the rock bottom of my career and life. A few missed opportunities and losing my dad the same year, I had no clue of what I wanted to do in my career and life. Uncertain about my next steps and facing series of tough decisions, I reached out to many for guidance and advice. And one such was a program that I was part of at Deloitte, where I met Tarun, who happened to be my mentor. Some listened to me, which was also very important, but some truly gave great insights and advice as well. These are people we call as mentors, don't we? They are the ones who we look up whenever we are at crossroads, feeling tentative and unsure. The gentleman we have on the show today is more than a friend and also a mentor. Since then, whenever I felt lost or unsure, a WhatsApp text would go to him. Chief, gotta talk. And despite his crazy schedule, he would make time for the conversation. Tarun always offers invaluable advice. His deep understanding of various industries, strategic thinking, helped me navigate through complex decisions. Tarun's guidance has always been like a compass, pointing me in the right direction. Back when I had tons of self doubt, questioned my abilities, Tarun's unwavering belief in me and my potential helped me build my confidence. His constant encouragement and positive reinforcement made a world of difference, motivating me to push me beyond my limits. People who know Tarun would agree that he is a phenomenal role model demonstrating behaviors, attitudes, and ethics that leads to success. As a mentor, he always challenged me to see bigger picture and develop long-term vision for my career. And always he would say, Gopal, think beyond the present and consider future possibilities. Was always his mantra, and it has been transformative truly. Tarun's own story of overcoming challenges and achieving success has been constant source of inspiration. Today, I'm thrilled to have Tarun Nallu here with us. His journey is filled with remarkable achievements, valuable lessons, and I'm excited for him to share his story with all of you. Tarun, welcome to the show. How have you been?
Thank you, Gopal. Absolute pleasure. I did not want to stop you, but you did. So, absolute pleasure connecting back with you over the last so many years on different topics, but this is a new one. Absolutely thrilled that you have started this, which was an idea seeded in your head for a few years, and then I'm glad you've acted on it. And thank you for having me over on this episode.
Wonderful. Before we begin with the typical style of asking questions and sharing responses, do you have anything to start and leave the audience with?
No, I'm just, I look forward to our conversation. This is more about two friends talking on topics that matter. We've done this multiple number of times. Just this time,
Yeah,
it's going to be focused on a few areas that broadly have been aligned on the podcast. So look forward.
pleasure. So, Tarun, I know you and your journey really well, but I would love for the audience to know and hear your story as well. So, could you share your career journey, especially the pivotal moments, with us?
Sure. Yeah. Just broadly to run through the timeline for those of you who are uh, listening to me for the first time, I'm a chemical engineer by qualification. So while I was doing engineering itself, I had a very different career path in my mind, did not want to pursue my master's or a role in engineering field. Always wanted to be a banker. And therefore, right out of engineering, a couple of banks that I went to, and then eventually, in those days, there obviously wasn't a very structured placement process. So went out, reached out, joined the bank, which was HSBC, started my career there with mergers and acquisitions team because I could crunch numbers out of my engineering experience. Spent some time in the US, came back to India, did banking for about 3 years, and then realized this is not the sector I want to build my career in. So every time you need to change, you first have to upskill yourself. So went back to college, and then eventually was getting interviewed for Finacle, which is the banking product at Infosys. But during the course of the interview, something interesting happened, and a role was offered without a title. They said, if you say no to what we're talking about, something new will come your way. I did not have the job, so I said no. And then I was pulled into HR team with the basic premise of come build the just-in-time hiring platform or the process or the system for Infosys. And they were hiring at scale in those days. I had immense respect for that company. So no questions asked, packed my bags, and then I moved to Bangalore. My house was actually closer to the distance from the exit gate to my house was shorter than from the gate to the office building, right? That's how close I used to live to the campus. I spent bulk of my 6 months in Bangalore, very close to Electronic City, and moved to Hyderabad. Stayed at Infosys for about 4 years, built their overall just-in-time hiring, off-campus hiring, as people tend to call it. I'm not an HR person. I'm not qualified. I don't have a degree. And I don't think campus recruitment or hiring has anything to do with HR. It's more a sales job. You just tend to sell a different part of the dream to the person sitting in front of you, and of course, internally to the organization. So in that context, it allowed me to look at a new function, learn a little bit more, and move to a completely new role when I joined Deloitte. Managed their campus recruitment team for a little bit, and then got into strategy, business, and innovation function. Learned a little bit on the ropes for consulting. And while the intent was always to set up my own firm, I had a very interesting challenge from the person who hired me at Infosys, reaching out to me for a role at Google. And I went and built their global research function out of multiple cities in the world, with the largest base being in Bangalore. That was a very thrilling experience. I was there at Google for 2 years. Was supposed to be a non-travel job, ended up traveling to these locations to set up the team. The team it was a wonderful team that we ended up building. It was 26 years was the average age of that team, and we had close to about 300 plus in India, and then built some of them outside of India as well. So extremely good experience, post which I decided to go ahead and start my company. So in 2015, took the plunge, started my own firm along with a friend from Infosys days. Two of us started it, a couple other people joined us 2 years into the overall business. And then we had a mini exit in 2020. And then I picked up a role back in the corporate world with Coursera. I had their strategic accounts for Asia Pacific based out of Singapore. So I've worked across, just to, in summary, I've worked across operations, I've worked in finance, HR, and now in sales, with consulting being the horizontal that I can talk about in my mind.
Sure. Amazing. I think one thing that is needed for people to do such shifts is enormous amount of clarity and courage, which I think was there always with you. And I've heard a lot of conversations on this particular topic of how you went to take on that decision to go solo. But was there a moment, if you can share that, was there a moment where you felt now you're ready for this, or now you have all the things that are required for you to be able to take that plunge? Or was it a planned one?
Yeah, so age plays a funny role in your mind. When you're in your 20s, you generally tend to think you can change the world. Right? There's nothing in the world that you cannot do, is generally the impression most of us out of college have. Which gets corrected in some cases, which kind of gets well refined as we go along, right? But if you were to seriously think about my journey, the decision to go solo or to start something evolved out of the company I was with while I was working at Infosys. There were specifically 3 or 4 of us who joined. A couple of us not from from HR background, so we don't look at things in that fashion. So one came from sales background, I came from operations. So we were looking at the mechanics of everything. Was it working well? What are the constraints? What do we need to do in that context? we realized there was a huge skill gap already brewing in India in 2007. So our first over food and drinks on an evening, we actually ended up creating a business plan for how do we upskill students in a college outside of college in a structured program. Right? We still have that document. I don't delete that document from my inbox. It's called crude document. We were very creative as a bunch, clearly, given the food and the drinks. So it was a business plan where we thought, what are those 5 skills that we should go out and train somebody on and make them employable, right? So asking that question and then building a business plan, which eventually was something a person that we worked with, a very senior person, a vice president level person from Infosys, eventually went out and started a company in 2010. We worked very closely with him, in fact, helped him in designing the logo, the name, and so on and so forth, right? He did have offers for the two of us, but we did not join at that point in time because we did not have the courage. We are first generation businessmen. So there are a lot of apprehensions that you're bound by. You tend to not take that courageous decision. So 2010 was a missed opportunity. It took me 5 years again to build that courage, muster it, and then take that plunge in 2015. But this time with a few more skills than what I had earlier on. I always say this: we are restricted by our own experience, and that is exactly what happened in 2007, 2010, and eventually in 2015. The experience is for you to get started, right? Take that first step, things will fall into place. If they don't, that's your moment to learn, right?
Sure. Wonderful. And I think you're absolutely right when you're saying that experience is one of the biggest things that propels us, if I can say, to take that decision of going solo. And if it works well, it works well. If it not, we end up learning. So thank you for sharing that. A lot of thoughts coming in on LinkedIn and YouTube. People who are joining in and listening into us, feel free to share in your thoughts, comments in the comments box, and I'll be more than happy to take them, including questions that you may have for Tarun. Um, what were some of the biggest challenges, if you can share, that you faced during transitions? And this would be transitioning within the corporate career, going out and doing something on your own, taking the decision of, okay, probably a good point to do an exit and coming back to corporate. And how did you overcome that? I mean, what were some of the thoughts that were going in your mind as you were dealing through that?
Well, I'm a huge movie buff, so let me go in that direction to explain this one. I generally think career shifts are like movies. There's a lot of similarities. For one, you need to market, right? Yourself, your story. What is it that you've done? Therefore, what skills have you possessed, and what are you learning at this point in time? I've been a keen learner all my life. Every year, there's something new that I learn, whether it is a sport, it's a new skill, like sketching, or it's a new skill. Like I've done Six Sigma. Presently, I'm in the middle of completing my independent director's certification as we speak. So something new is always brewing on the side, and that's a function of you look at yourself and say, what are skills that you really want to possess in the next 3 to 5 years, and you start working in that direction. For me, every time I've had a shift, I've never had that question on why would somebody hire me for that role. It's always a question of why not, right? So it's a question of going and convincing them that here's what I've done, and here are basic skills that I've acquired out of this, but I can do the following, right? And there's always elements. We tend to box ourselves very quickly, be it the nature of how we've been brought up, or generally the societal pressures around. If you're a 4 years engineering student in mechanical, you get branded for life. My primary question has always been, you've studied math for 12 years, so you're a student of math. So go back to the fundamentals, and then you kind of see the world a little differently than what you see today, right? So in that context, same thing is how I follow in my career. When it comes to transitions, I look at what are skills I've learned, what are skills they would ideally need. If there are no skills, be upfront and tell them I don't have these skills, but I'm willing to learn, or I've already started that process of learning. and show proof, right? So those have been elements that I've looked at. These are never easy decisions. Sometimes these opportunities come your way in terms of network that you build, people that you kind of work with, impressions that you create, impressions that you break, patterns that you follow over the years, and those impressions are long lasting. That the last impression you create with somebody you work with in an organization is what they'll remember you for, not what you have
Absolutely.
or the ability that you have. So it's important you network with a purpose. And there is no harm or shame in reaching out to people and letting them know that this is something you've not done. Would you be willing to take a bet on? Uh, right. So that's essentially how you kind of, it's your career. If you want it, you got to go reach out to people and ask for it. And engage in a conversation, engage in a learning path, and be ready to start at the bottom. I know a lot of folks. When I was running my own company, we were working with venture capital firms and in the ecosystem to help startups raise capital as one of the offerings. I know a bunch of folks who've actually been at a reasonably senior level in their career. They've dropped everything and they've gone back to an analyst role and joined a VC firm just to learn the ropes. And then they've kind of grown in the next 3 to 5 years into a GP on LL or an LP, right? Depending on their capability. So it is strictly a function of how you look at not getting hung up with levels, designations, pay. If you really want to make a career shift, there is a pull. Well, make everything around yourself align to that pull, right? That's essentially what you can do, and that's in your control. So those are elements that have worked with me every single time I've had a shift from what I'm doing, what I was doing at that time into the new space that I've done. It does take a little more convincing as you grow older, because again, perceptions and like I said, people are limited by their own experience. When I was moving into the sales role, my present role during the course of interview, yeah, that question came up. You've not had a P&L that you managed for a corporate directly, right? But you did, right? Every role rolls up into revenue in some shape or form. Is that a direct or an indirect one? Is what you've got to kind of be aligned. How well do you understand your business? I've had this conversation, at least between us and then broadly when we were at Deloitte, right? First, let's learn the business, then we can do the function work that we're doing. And that holds true even today.
Amazing. And I want to reflect on the conversation that we had when I was transitioning out of EY to uh, take up a role in IIM Ahmedabad. So there were two big, I would say unknowns for me. One was corporate academia, and two was the whole world from HR to public policy. And I still remember how you guided me through that conversation about try to learn as much as you can, which I did even before I joined, and be open to say that you know only this much. Well, it worked for me. Probably there are a lot of cases where it doesn't work, where organizations are unwilling to take a bet on people who have little or no experience in the kind of roles that they're hiring for. But that's where I think the world of networking opens up. If people are really seeing what you do, what value you bring onto the table, I think it will work out, and people will be willing to place a bet on you. So, thank you for sharing that. It's really incredible. Shaili Kapoor, I don't know if you remember her from Deloitte
Of
days.
course I do. Hi, Shailesh.
She's just written a message. Talk about missing out. It hit me now that I haven't been in touch, and here you are running your own thing for past 9 years. That's incredible. Congratulations. I'd love to hear all about it. What inspired you to take that leap, and how has it been going? Let's definitely catch up soon and fill each other on what we've been up to best. Yeah.
Absolutely, Shaili. Look
So
forward to doing that. Catch up with you on LinkedIn soon.
yeah. So lovely. The other question that I had in terms of the journey that you have taken in the last 25 years. Now you have led large teams. or teams of various sizes, if I can say. Some were small, some were large. And as an entrepreneur, probably one man show as well. What were some of the key lessons that you learned as a leader, which is probably crucial for success?
Well, a lot of learnings. I'd talk about maybe one or two. Um, the general perception that for you to be a leader, you need a title, designation, or somebody else to call you a leader is a myth, right?
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
Leadership is your behavior, which shows up in your thoughts and in your actions, right? You don't need a team or people around you to be a leader. And that's a very, very big realization that comes to you only after you start leading teams,
Mm,
in a corporate setup or otherwise. All of us have had these opportunities through our schooling days, college, and of course, as we work in a corporate, multiple situations. You
yeah.
don't have to formally be a people's manager um, to lead them, right? And that's that realize the day you get that realization, um, you look at leadership very differently, right? One of
True
my
that.
mentors used to say this. This is, I think, a quote by Tim Peters, one of them. But broadly, the essence of the quote was: leaders don't make others as followers; they make others as leaders as well. And it stays with me. It's a very loaded statement. The more you think about it, the more it inspires you and makes you feel that there's so much more to do. The general perception is if I'm the leader in many corporate experiences that I've had, um, as a leader of the table, you are expected to lead, so show the way, and therefore act what you are essentially expected to do at that point in time, which is not true, right? Um, the leader can be anybody who's probably not part of the conversation. It can be a child, it can be an old person around you, and they can teach you a thing or two about leading. Question is, are you open to learn to be a leader? You have to learn to be a leader. It's not a skill. Some people, they say, are born leaders, right? I don't think so. I think leaders are made. They're made by the experiences they are subject to. They're made by the teachings that they're subject to. And it is hard-earned skill. There is no right age for you to mature. We've seen young CEOs, 25, 26 years old, leading large corporations. We've seen 80 plus people building corporations which are large enough. So there is enough proof that age is not a barrier for leadership, and uh, anybody can inspire you from from a leadership standpoint. In my experience, the one thing that I've always tried to follow is listen hard, speak slow, think fast. If you're kind of blending these three together somewhere in your leadership style, um, and don't take your position for granted. Just because you're entitled or titled in some sense doesn't give you the leeway. You still have to go back to the basics. Somebody is reaching out to you for a problem at a crisis level. Ensure that you ask them the right questions and support them or guide them in the right direction. Uh, for me, a couple of really good examples on leadership um, in practice has been my work at Infosys. I had the good fortune of working with some of the leaders at that time. I think Nandan Nilekani was the CEO. He always used to talk about this in town halls. For being the CEO of the organization, his inbox used to be zero emails, right? And he would say, when I read an email, there are only three things I do. I delegate. So if somebody needs to work on it, I do that. I reply in case I'm expected to reply, or I delete, right? It's not something I have to act on. It does not hold any place in my inbox. And that's just a simple version of um, leadership principles in practice. And you learn from it, which essentially is be very clear in your thought. To be able to do that, we've all got inboxes and we manage them in very strange ways, right? It's a small
Yeah.
example, but for me, it goes a long way to talk about the clarity, the skill that you need, the experience, and the acumen that you would develop over a period of time to do that. So you've got to continuously evolve into that role as a leader.
I'm just reminded of a few friends. I wouldn't name the company, I wouldn't name where they were from, but took pride in saying that I had about 13,100 emails. Do you even know what that means? I'm like, no. So, yeah. Yeah. I'm going to take a question that Sharon has. What is your view about automation tsunami wave that is about to hit all of us on a global level?
Well, broadly spoken about, theme of the year, theme of the, I would say, decade, we are going to hear more and more about generative AI, large language models, and the job losses and all of that. That narrative will continue. My general view is yes, generative AI is here to stay. It will change the way we work. It essentially means it's an opportunity for all of us to evolve from what we are doing today to what we would be doing eventually. So I'm not saying it will kill jobs at the scale or pace at which people are talking about. Uh, if somebody is able to do the job today without generative AI skills, and somebody else has that skill, you'll get replaced by the person who has that skill because
Correct.
they would be more efficient and they would get more work done. Just a very simple example, right? One of our sales leaders in the past would say, if you have to draft an email for your client, you would say, "I'll do that in an hour," right? In the present day, he'd say, "Why an hour? Open ChatGPT, put in the request, it generates it. It's a 5 minute job." So now you cannot hide behind the fact that I'll do it in an hour, right? Um, and it's a skill everybody has. I
Correct.
work at Coursera, and while I'm not representing their viewpoint, these are my personal viewpoints. I'm not here to talk about the role and the work I do, but as an organization, they've adopted generative AI in a very big way. We get to see this in corporate world, in educational institutions, governments across the world. There is tremendous amount of work that is happening from an adoption standpoint, some faster than others, but I think everybody will catch up. It will create more job opportunities as long as you are learning the skill. So don't restrict yourselves that I can handle chat gpt and that's the start and end of this. That's just the beginning. There's a lot more generative AI can do, from designing business plans to absolute contrast on giving you insights about something that uh, has to be fabricated and created based on the inputs that you've given. So there is a lot more to just one tool, and there is it's going into very, very, very different spaces. Uh, Maybe, who knows, this podcast, I was jokingly telling Gopal um, on a message earlier saying
Yes.
you should ask me this question in Tamil and I'll reply in Telugu, which are our mother tongues, and that could be a reality a year from now, given the way large language models are evolving, and we already see a bunch of companies in that direction. So yes, it is a true tsunami. It's just not a short tsunami. It's going to be there from an impact standpoint for a while.
No, wonderfully said. I'm on the advisory board for one of the institutions, IBS Mumbai. And one of the things that, as advisory board members, we suggested as a result of how things are evolving at workplaces for skilling students better is to look at embedding generative AI as a topic across everything that they teach. And I think kudos to the leadership. They have done a good job of, starting doing their initiatives around that. But it's just one institution that I'm aware of. I'm sure, and I really hope all of them start bringing this as extremely important element in the curriculum, and that is need of the hour for all the student communities as well. Even for communities within organizations, it's all the more important because if you're not adopting to this, you're going to miss the bus. And yeah, that would be really unfortunate as well. So, couple of thoughts again from Sudipto. This piece of unboxing is relevant. However, is it not also an, did I lose you? Yeah, this piece of
No,
unboxing is relevant. However, is it not also an luggage that hiring guys is sold into? What are your thoughts on how to overcome this issue?
I'm a little unclear on the question, in terms of Um,
I think it referred to the earlier point that we were making about how hiring happens and what are we, how people
oh,
typically
in
get
terms of,
into.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So here's my, I think that is already changing. The big shift in terms of hiring process that I get to see is, we were hiring for qualification a while back, right? If you have an MBA in marketing, I'd hire you into marketing roles. So we thought that was enough. I think that shift has happened. We've started hiring for skills. So I don't care if you have a marketing background, as long as you tell me that in your past job and you have proof to prove that you can use the following tools which are relevant for your present job, I'm happy to hire. I think more companies are moving in that direction, where skills are more important than qualifications, or for that matter, degrees per se, right? Um, but the shift is not large enough for all institutions to accept them. And I'm talking
Mm.
about two ends of it, right? Which is all corporates versus all educational institutions. And that's the gap that needs to be bridged over a period of time. Uh, it's a slow shift. There are a bunch of universities across the world who've started creating degree programs which are flexible in nature, the supermarket model. It's like walk in, pick and choose the subjects that you want. We know how many credits you get out of it, and at the end of it, we'll stitch a degree together. Right?
Mm.
And this is a great model simply on the count of two things. Why should I commit to something for 4 years when I don't know what the world would look like in 4 years from now? So in
Sure.
that context, this is a very, very forward-looking model. Some countries like Taiwan, I see a few in Malaysia, some in Singapore, go that route. But broadly, the acceptance still is pending. It is moving. Some sectors are adopting this in a much faster fashion than others, but not at the scale that we would want still.
Sure.
So if you're a hiring manager, or if you are in a role where you're hiring people, I'd say make that mind shift. And if you're speaking to recruiters, let them know to bring you some profiles which are not qualification based or past experience. I'm doing the same role in a different company, so I'll come and do this here, is a myth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you're bringing in a very important point. And I always believe this, that the old format of careers where it used to be always a linear move up is probably going to be dead soon. And it's going to be more of move up, move right, move up again, move left, and move up, which means you got to be open with both vertical and horizontal shifts. A lot of people at times are not open with horizontal shifts because they're scared about, will I be successful? A lot of people are absolutely averse to the idea of backward shift as well, because it means that, oh, what happens if, I've been known for this, I have made my name in this domain industry. If I were to go and create my new identity in a different world, how will it look like? Will I be successful? A lot of self doubts, a lot of imposter syndrome cases as well. Do you have any advice for people on that particular aspect? Because at the end of the day, if you're all in a career which is going to be rapidly evolving as a result of factors that are not in our control, any advice that you would like to give to them?
Yeah, quick one. I uh, I mean, I relate to the question and the thesis that you're kind of putting out there on multiple counts. People tend to think about this in a wrong way, which is the fear of failure. Um,
Hmm.
think about, how does in Indian ecosystem a failed entrepreneur gets treated versus how does a failed entrepreneur gets treated in a US, right?
Hmm.
If you're a failed entrepreneur for, let's say, 3 years, you run a startup, and then um, you are not successful, or your company has wound up, propensity for you to start a second one immediately is almost zero in India, right?
True.
Uh, which is not the case back in the US, or some of the other evolved startup markets. Um, I happened to meet this startup founder in Singapore, IIT Bombay graduate, ran a startup in India. I would not name the startup, but very successful. They raised upwards of 25 million over the 3-year window. But eventually the startup shut down after that. So the feedback given to her was you weren't listening to your customers, you weren't listening to the feedback from the investors. So guess what she does? She is from a humble background, only daughter, uh, goes and works at Taco Bell, stands behind the counter for 3 months, and she takes
Yeah, I remember
orders.
you sharing this.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
gives me goosebumps every time I think about this conversation. And when you meet that person, and it just kind of paints such a wonderful picture that she wasn't afraid about what society is going to think. If she's from IIT Bombay, I'm assuming her JE rank is less than 100. Um, to say no to corporate jobs, to build something, fail at it, and then go back and stand behind Taco Bell uh, order counter and clean tables for 3 months, which is 100 days, is not easy, right? If she can do that, what stops us, right? Why are we afraid of taking a step back when it is needed? So that's the example I talk about every time somebody comes up with this. I mean, there's your intellect, your ideas, your career only means so much to you, not to others, and it should not matter. So own it and feel for it yourself before worrying about what others think about your career.
Profound. I don't think we could have said it any differently. I think there is a related question from Chaitra Ashok. Hi, Tarun. Hope
Yeah,
all's
hi Cash.
well. Super happy to see you. Question: career shifts are tricky for sure. Your top three recommendations on general certifications and trainings you'd suggest, regardless of which function they'd like to shift to.
Sure. I'd have to maybe fall back on again skills if you were to go back there, right? Um, every function has amalgamation of three different, every role rather has an amalgamation of three different functions, right? A skill that you need for the job. So certainly look for what is that certification for that specific role. It could be in HR, in sales, in operations, whatever that function is, there is a certain skill required and there are very specific domain certifications. So look for that. That's your first one. Second, I generally think emerging technologies and what's coming. So, if in the context of what we've been talking about, I think generative AI, understanding of generative AI tools, pick any that are out there. Getting started is more important than which one. If you start liking it more, you can always build upon it. But and third, I would say is I think every working professional should do a course in finance, whether you're a
Hmm.
finance student or not. And this might be radical, this might be different, but I generally think once you do that course of basic understanding of business math, a lot of your perceptions about how organizations work, how teams are designed, why is it that I never get budgets from my boss, you'll be able to address some of those for yourself before asking others. You have a better understanding of how finance moves in general, right? Financial literacy is not something that is broadly taught in Indian schools or colleges, while it should be.
Yeah.
Um, since it's missing, I'm saying at least now that you're thinking about it, do some certification about corporate finance or business finance, whichever is easier for you, just to understand basically cash flows of what is it mean, how does budgeting get done, right? Where are budgets allocated? Which is the biggest function in terms of spend versus revenue for the organization? Then a lot of the other understanding about working in corporate world comes in uh, a lot more clearer than what you would generally have without finance.
Wonderful. I'll move on to take the next one, which is your life as an entrepreneur and the way you moved into it and the way you came out of it as well. I'm sure there were moments where you felt you're doing the best, you're going on the right path. There might have been some moments where you felt, probably, let's quit, let's do something else. How did you ensure that you stayed true on the path?
First up, again, I generally think if I were a policymaker, I would basically ask every individual during their education program, whether schooling, college, masters, whenever, to build a startup or build a company and run it, right? There is no better experience to learn life skills than this experience.
True.
You can have a very heavy title for yourself as a co-founder, CEO, managing director, whatever you fancy, but you are also in that whole space doing the work. So you're learning how to do, so it humbles you at multiple levels. So
Sure.
in my mind, the experience itself teaches you a lot. Does it raise questions? Every single day, right? Every day when you're going back to work, or you wake up in the morning, you're like, what next? In our case, there were multiple moments as we built our startup as well. We started out in Bangalore. Our first entity, when we set up, February 7th of 2015 is when I decided, along with my partner, to set up the company. First generation entrepreneurs from for both of us. We've not had any family history of running a business of any sort. So we wanted to learn, how do you set up an entity? So we went to a CA. We actually went to 6 different CA firms, right? 5 of them gave us a bunch of applications, said, fill this up, drop them here, we'll set up your entity and we'll let you know. The 6th one said, how much time do you have? He pulled a paper, he explained the whole process, and he was the one we eventually went with, because we were looking for a guy who can teach us while we are learning to build our own company. The second and very interesting experience was, we completed our first assignment 15 days from the time we incorporated, and we got a check. We didn't have a bank account, so we put it into our personal bank. So the next check came 4 months later, and we realized we were very hesitant to ask for the money that we own, or they owned us, for the work that we've done, simply because there was always that apprehension of, oh, we're doing phase 2 of the project, they'll give us, right? So then we very quickly learned it in the first 6 months. Then we started taking roles. We said, I'll be the lead on this account. If I'm doing the project, you be the bad guy and start chasing upon some of these, and similarly the rest of the project. So it was learning from that level. So yeah, there were multiple moments where the decisions were very tough, when we decided to move to Singapore to set up our second entity and build the business to grow in this part of the world, and so on and so forth. And eventually, as we kind of every single year in December, we used to sit and reflect on what worked, what did not. But it was never the question of should we quit. It was question of what should we do differently, what can we do differently, and so on and so forth, including should we kind of bring more people into the organization. We initially thought we'll never hire for the firm, which we did not. The other 2 members who joined also joined as partners. So yeah, I mean, they were tough moments pretty much every day of your waking life as an entrepreneur, because you don't have a steady income. You have to build that. You were a small firm at that point in time, and so you're overworked. 16, 18 hours was a regular day. But that's the fun of building a company. You never crib. If you go to an office for 3 days in a row and you work for 12 hours, you will crib the 4th day. You would never do that when you're building your own company, which is what drives a lot of the founders in the world.
Powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Any advice that you would like to give to people who are aspiring entrepreneurs, especially when it comes to putting a business plan in place, how to go about raising capitals, and we're talking about a timeline where it's a bit very difficult to be able to start on your own, given the funding winter and many other conversations that we're all looking at. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, the first advice is, if you have an idea, your idea is only as good as you implement it. So get started. You will refine the idea. You will never have a perfect business plan from day one, right? So don't wait for that day. Just get started. It is a continuous process. Your idea, your customers, everybody look at things. You're trying to solve a problem which has not been solved, so the solution is new as well. So work with people who are facing that problem and solve it and see if it can be a scalable solution. Don't sit in a corner of your house and build up a solution and say, now I'm going to go sell this to multiple people. Work with the owners of the problem and create a solution that they're ready to pay for. And if it's a scalable problem, you've hit jackpot, right? On building organizations and raising capital, I've had always this view that build a fundamentally strong business so you don't have to worry about raising capital. Raising capital is only a function of accelerating your business. What can be done in 5 years? Can it be done in 12 months now? Which is exactly why somebody is putting money. And I've had this question being asked by investors quite often in conversations, saying, you're asking for 2 million, I'll give you 4 million. Can you do the whole thing in 6 months? It's not how businesses are built.
Correct.
Right. So, which is why the whole question of profitability comes into play even today for most of the startups in the startup ecosystem, not just in India, but across. So build fundamentally strong, valuable business. The best advice that has been given to me during this comes from my business partner's father-in-law. He's been running his own business for many years. So I took a Uber from my house in Bangalore to my friend's house, and I got off the car and he was standing there. He said, "Oh, startup founders and you guys took Uber, huh? How much did you spend?" So I said, $250. He said, "So how are you going to make that $250 by the end of the day?" He said, "If you're walking out with 10 rupees that you're spending and you're not going back home with 11 rupees, you're not thinking like a businessman." And that was very powerful, right? You tend to think about unit economics on a day-to-day basis. It helps you drive your business. So that has been the best advice that I got, and I can pass it on to somebody who's building a business.
Fantastic. Tarun, you've been my mentor for last 13 years. Who has been your mentor and how have they shaped your journey?
Oh, wow. A loaded question, Gopal. I'd say, I think a lot of the initial mentoring happened at home. Of course, mom, dad, and my elder brother. Learned a lot from the three of them. And then, of course, as you grow older, you have um friends that come into your life. I have a couple of very close friends, no filters, and we kind of share pretty much everything. So they've been the constant, I think, these 4 5 people um, over the last 25 30 years. But as I started working, there were some people you connect with, and there is that natural ability to listen to you and then give you the right advice, or at least calm you down in situations. I've had about 5 or 6 of those throughout my career. Right. I'd love to very quickly name them as well. We've had Somnath Baishya is the chief people officer at Tesco. He's just written a book called Thriving in Talent, I think. So he's been a go-to person for me. DN Prasad, who's of course been a mentor to many of us. I've had the good fortune of knowing him for 16, 18 years. He's been a very strong mentor. And luckily, we used to stay right next to each other in Singapore for 4 years. So learned a lot through my conversations with him. I've had some non-Indian founders, a person called David Tran, Vietnamese American. He's somebody who's always brought the overall conversation and said, I want to focus on you. So does this work for you? Does this not work for you? Those are 2 questions he's always asked in every conversation. Very sweet person. And he's somebody I reach out to quite often. There have been awe-inspiring people like Jagdish Kinney in Bangalore.
Yes.
I mean, if there's one person who's kind of brought a lot of clarity in thought from what I do, it has to be him. I think one quote from him that I always tend to remind myself, in his career, he says, first job, I learned how to build brands. Second job, I learned how to build organizations. And third, I learned how to build industries. And he was the first CEO for Airtel in India, right? So there is no better way to define a career than what Jagdish has done. Extremely clear when we talk to him. He just simplifies everything down to a yes, no, and very thoughtful way. And of course, I've had this woman from the US. Her name is Patience Schutz. She runs um a whole bunch of Find Yourself sessions in Laguna, California. Very sharp with advice, very quick on the retort. Uh, Somebody I have very high regard for, and yeah, there have been these people who are constants, and there are of course floaters who you work with in a short stint, and you learn from them. You get inspired on occasions and continue to stay in touch.
All right. I think I know it's almost about 10:30. Tarun is joining us from Singapore. That's where he stays. It's quite late. And before I get to my rapid fire, a very interesting question. And this is something that we discussed, we will ask as well. That most of my podcast, in most of my podcasts, people would have a very different background, which typically would have books. Can you tell us a bit about your background today?
You put me on the spot there. I was sharing it with Gopal before we started. This is my 15-month-old's playpen, and it is possible that I'm using this simply because it's past 10:20 here. So she's gone to bed, so I'm allowed to sit here. So I was telling him everybody reads a lot of books with fancy libraries when they attend these calls. I wanted to take us back a few years and talk about Three Little Pigs and many other books that are right behind me at this time. So that's the background. I tend to play with these toys more than her at this time, so it's my favorite place.
Good one. Great. So, with that, let's get into a quick rapid fire. What's the
sir.
favorite piece of advice that you've ever received?
If you want to learn something, learn it and then teach it to somebody else. I think that's the best way to learn.
Absolutely. And I have been the recipient of that quite a bit from you. Your favorite book?
Fountainhead for all of the times, but right now Three Little Pigs. I read that a few times during the day.
Wonderful. What's the first thing that you do in the morning, every
A
morning?
baby time. She sleeps in a different room. We have a monitor. When she wakes up, we wake up. So yeah, that's the first thing we do.
Wonderful. Who's your biggest role model?
In real life, it is mom. My mom has learned how to use desktop, has learned how to do yoga for 10 years, has learned how to use an Android tablet, a mobile phone. She teaches my dad. So she's been somebody
Wow.
that I get inspired with quite a bit. But from the corporate world, I'd have to say Elon Musk. I just love the fact that he's broken all the norms and said, as a CEO for one company, I can also start 10 other companies and do justice and run all of them equally well. I think that's just phenomenal. In my adulthood, I've not seen that come through. And as a person who's built something, I know what kind of effort goes into running a
Yeah.
company. For him to do this at scale is just brilliant.
Netflix series or a book?
I'm a movie buff, visual person, so I'd say um, movie on Netflix. If it's a series, it's probably a pass. A movie on Netflix followed by a book. Yeah, that's ideally what I do.
Okay. And if you were to describe your career journey in one word, what would that be?
Some of your speakers in the podcast in the past are people who have had a very illustrious career in their uh, they've reached a point where they're running their gig. We can safely say they're retired from the corporate world, the bulk of their career. Mine is still on, so I'd say evolving is where I would put it.
Amazing. That's what I keep saying that as well. Probably subconsciously picked up from you. So, so any parting thoughts for the audience, especially given the times that we are living in?
Uh, well, I go back to the mantra that I said. I think doesn't matter what role, what situation we're in. These three things have been constant in my mind. I keep if there's one talk to myself session, if I were to do, it has always been think fast, speak slow, listen hard. I try to practice these as much as I can. And there are a few misses here and there, but go back to these fundamentals. They've always held me in good stead. So yeah, that would be my piece of advice.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tarun, for joining us today. Before we conclude, um, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for staying up all this while and taking this. It's not easy, I know. So say my hi to your daughter. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in for today's episode of Career Shifts. I hope that Tarun's insights and stories have inspired you to rethink your career journey. Every career shift is a chance to redefine your narrative, filled with new opportunities and potential to inspire others. Remember, your career path is uniquely yours. It's your ability to ask for help and find your own mentors that will lead you to true success. Stay inspired, keep thinking beyond the limits, as Tarun always keeps telling me, and join us for the next episode as we continue to share stories of remarkable career transformations. Until then, keep shifting forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gopal. You have a lovely evening too.
Thank you.